Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? Happy Halloween if you're listening to this on the 31st of October, 2023 when it comes out. And if you're listening to it sometime in the future, hello. Are you doing anything for Halloween? That's all I'm going to say. This episode with Jen, we started out recording and I'm like, this may be the one that just doesn't work. We both have a lot going on and we're not really in a place to talk about a lot of it. I do share pretty vulnerably about one of the things that's going on. I'm a little vague because it's just too fresh and I'm not sure how to navigate through this. But some of the things that we talk about are, what do you do when you have bumps and hiccups in relationships? And for me, I'm really struggling with when something happens because there are some patterns that I talk about in this episode that are challenging for me. Am I repeating a pattern? Is this the other person? Do I stick to what I know? I often don't trust my reality. How do we navigate around those things? And Jen talks about an issue that was problematic in one of her relationships. And we talk about that through the lens of neurodivergence and how our need to have information often can look like something else for people. I talk about how that shows up for me in relationships and people can feel like I'm questioning their authority. We talk about in relationships, what do you do when there is a hiccup and can you work through it and do you not work through it? And then if you're someone like me who has strong feelings when there's a hiccup, how do you navigate that, especially if you've been told to just let things go and to move on? I think that this is a highly relatable episode if you're in any relationships, have ever been in any relationships. I think it really is. Jen talks about the quote of what set of assumptions am I working under and always being able to ask that. I usually don't know that until after the fact and things don't work out when I think about expectations and disappointments. So I think that's all I'm going to say. I hope you enjoy it. I think it's very vulnerable. I think it's very real. I think it's very relatable. And now on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Patricia. I think a full discussion about how I am right now would knock your poor podcast off of the clean list. So maybe I will not answer that question.
Pretty much in the same place, but go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, how are you? And you answered it. Yep. Bleepity bleep, bleep, bleep. I mean, the whole show would just have to be a series of bleeps.
I know.
I'm sorry.
Before we recorded, I said this may be the episode that just doesn't make it because here come the tears.
I got you.
Thank you. I'm very dysregulated. Been having a lot of friendship things come up. Thank God not with you. And it's just really hard to navigate. And because I'm in the middle of it, I don't know how to talk about it. And what I can say is what's becoming very evident to me, especially with my autism diagnosis, is that the assessor said, I don't have a problem establishing friendships, but maintaining them is challenging for me. And so, I want to make sense out of things. I want to have meaning. I want to understand. And so when these blips come up, I really struggle because part of me feels authentically wanting to know that if I've said or done something that is hurtful, I have the capacity for people to come and let me know. I can own my stuff. I can look at it. And I'm very clear about that. I also think that in one of these situations, I was not a good communicator at all. So I take responsibility for that. I think still what happened was hurtful. And in this other situation, I think somebody was just ready to have a reaction. And I don't think it had anything to do with what I said. And so I'm straddling this fence of asking for feedback and reality checks around my communication because some of this was done via a method that somebody could check what I had said. And I asked for feedback. But then when there was this hiccup in the relationship, then I got different feedback that what I said kind of contributed to this hiccup, which is confusing to me. So are you tracking me so far? Because I hate when I talk in vague ways, but I just don't know how else to communicate
more specifically.
No, I got you. And I have some of the backstory too. So
Yeah. And so I feel like if I ask for feedback and you give me feedback and then the situation changes and then your feedback changes based on the situation changing, that's confusing to me because that doesn't feel consistent to me. And then I wonder, am I being defensive? And because I know that maintaining relationships is challenging for me, am I being stubborn and not looking at what I know? Or is it possible that I have an unusually high level of insight? I have an unusually gifted ability to communicate very clearly, not in all situations, but in this one, I think I was very clear about communicating and inviting the person to let me know if it didn't land well with them. And if people have wounding, they're going to hear things and they're going to read things and take things out of this that I may not have been intending. And where is that balance for me between standing by what I know is true about me, because my sense of reality gets shaken up so often, and especially in light of this new awareness of I struggle in relationships. So is this the other person? Is this me? Is this both of us? How do I find that out? Do I just trust that it's okay for me to show up and be authentically me? Because I know that unless you've done something egregious to me, I think I'm very kind and extend a tremendous amount of compassion and allow people to be where they're at and to come up against me. But I'm really feeling rattled by this. And one of the people that is on the periphery has a very different take on what happened and is not in a place where they want to communicate about it right now. And I totally understand that. But again, that with my PDA, so if you're new listening, I'm autistic, and PDA is a profile of autism. And it's pathological demand avoidance, which is a terrible name, or pervasive or persistent drive for autonomy, which means feeling like I have control. And if there's a hiccup, I want to talk about it and figure it out. And that doesn't work for everybody right now. So that sense of I don't have control, knowing somebody is having feelings about something, and they can have feelings and it still doesn't mean that there's anything that I did wrong. And I did run this whole situation by someone this morning that I trust, who's not involved. And she was very clear that I didn't do anything wrong. But this is the stuff, and I see you shaking your head. No, you didn't, Jen.
Yeah.
But I think that these things happen for us a lot, and they can, we have big feelings about things. And then did I do something? Is there a pattern I need to see? Can I trust that what I said was okay? This is just hard stuff. Blech.
Yes, it is hard. And I hope you know how the whole spirit of you as I know it with this podcast is you don't want people to feel alone. And the stuff that you're going through is relatable, and you share your heart very openly.
Yeah.
I admire that.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be here with you and happy to be a part of it. I think this is so relatable. Like, you're so not alone. Being in relationship is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And it is easier, I think, for almost, maybe not all of us. I know for some people, particularly if you have a lot of social anxiety, it can be very hard to establish friends or make any kind of connection. And then I would only imagine the energy there might be like once you're in, like you're staying. So the maintaining kind of comes at people. We all have different levels of risk when it comes to risking the loss of certain connections, and I think how I see what you're going through is your commitment and dedication to authenticity, right, is a little bit in dynamic tension, say that instead of conflict, right, with a desire to maintain relationships. And I mean, it's for all of us. It's really, really hard. I forget who said it. I should know this. Is a little embarrassing that I don't know this, but compared human beings to porcupines, where we're sort of, we want to cuddle and we're maybe soft on the front side, but then we got all these spikes and spiky on the backside. And like, it doesn't surprise me that you got a bit of feedback from someone, and then either in a little while, maybe it was a part that thought differently, and they kind of come up and smack you with a different kind of feedback. And you're like, hey, wait a minute. And we are inconsistent. We have parts that come up and have different views on things. And I am sorry that hurt you and confused you. And I get that. And I don't think you did anything wrong any more than I think a porcupine having like a soft front and a spiky back is wrong. It's not. It's just the way we are. And if there's a time when I come out with my soft front and I happen to hit into your spiky back, like, we're going to have a conflict. And then if we're both happen to be in the space where we're kind of coming from our soft bellies, then maybe things will go a little smoother. And then, like if we're both at our prickly backs, it's gonna be, and there's all these things that happen. And I just want to show you a lot of grace and love and support in this, and really like welcome to being human. I don't think there's any one of us alive that doesn't have some version of, I'm going to say bleep, 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 bleep. Do I know?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Today, this one's going to end up not getting used because I'm not going to be able to hold back my curse words today. I just know it.
So I need to ask a little clarification. So when you talk about my prickly back bumping up against your soft belly, because I don't read subtext, I'm like, are you implying that I said or did something that I shouldn't and that bumped up against somebody else? I mean, I'm serious. Like, I'm like, you're talking and I'm like, like, did I do, really my head is like, did I do something wrong? And I'm like,
No, you didn't. You didn't do anything wrong. It's really this question of like, who gets to say like, what's wrong? I mean, I know you and I know your heart. And while we can all have moments where we're not proud of, or we're maybe coming from a very young part of ourselves or something we can have some choice words about, like even that's like not wrong. And I don't think you did that in this situation. I think you were very thoughtful, contemplative. I know you to care deeply about people, other people's feelings. And it's also okay I know with me and some of the challenges that I have in my life, because I want to be a quote unquote good person, I need big boundaries sometimes. And it's really okay to not be that nice. And so, no, in fact, I almost wish I had thrown it the other way and said, your soft belly comes against my spikes. Because again, it's just, I think what I'm trying to do is invite you into a space where it's really, really natural, and to show yourself a lot of grace. And if someone can't quite see it from your perspective, because really we're both at all the time. We have soft bellies and the spikes at the same time. And you've seen me this way and I've seen you this way, where we do get to a certain point where we're just like, you know what, forget it. I don't have the time and energy for this. And that can come across as a read that whatever. What are some of the old like words from childhood, right? Like you're mean. Like I have an 11-year-old daughter right now who she has to be kind, and I would prefer her to be friendly to everybody, but she doesn't need to be friends with everybody. Like whether or not things are vibrational match. Now, generally, let's take you and me, for instance. We do tend to be a vibrational match. And there's lots of context to our relationship, including being on separate, sides of the country, like that probably influence how much space we're needing to take or something like that. And we are very much of the time, given our set of circumstances right now, that includes so much that I'm not even articulating. Another thing so the geographic distance is one thing, but also our age difference and where we are in our lives is another. Like if you were as up to your eyeballs in young kid stuff that I am, like it may be a source of conflict. That is not us. You and I tend to be very much a vibrational match. And then our environments and our stages in life are also a vibrational match. And even with us, I do expect that there may be times when we're not a vibrational match, probably because I haven't eaten or I've done something stupid like stay up all night, instead of prioritize. Like these things add to my spikiness sometimes, And so like when you left me that polo earlier, which I did get a chance to listen to, I just wanted to say, you know who you are. I know who you are. And even within the context of all of that safety, there may be moments where it's like, hey, wait, are you who I think you are? Because that's like human. It's just human, and you're growing and changing, and we are inconsistent. And I want for you and for me and for any listener out there to just like, can we breathe some space and some peace into the conflict?
Yeah.
Am I making sense? Is that helping?
You are, but it is interesting that when you start to give examples about things, and I'm like, are you talking about what I did, or are you talking in general? And I'm naming that because what I would invite you, the listener, to do is this is an opportunity, if you want, to notice how you process or don't process information. So earlier when Jen was talking about being a porcupine and the soft belly and the spiky back, did you track that and understand? And if you did, great. And if you got confused, then that, like I did, what happens for me is this relating, are you giving me information about what I'm talking about? And subtext meaning, Are you talking about like, am I the soft belly? Am I the prickly back? Like I have a hard time making those connections. And so I know how to say like, I don't get it. And I tracked you. But then again, when you were talking about something like, I'm like, wait, are you giving me a message about my behavior? Because I'm in this place where there's a part of me, if I allow myself to touch it, is like very fragile, very dysregulated, and very young. That place of did I do something wrong? Like wanting reassurance. Did I do something wrong? Yeah. And there's also another part that I shared with you. The polo that you're talking about is one I shared with you about this situation this morning because it's relatively new. Is can I hold what I know the truth is for me? This came up for me around getting an autism diagnosis. I felt like I was autistic. I felt like I was PDA, but didn't trust it. And it was worth it for me to get a formal diagnosis. I see this pattern of knowing what is true for me and not being able to always hold on to it and own it. I think that's very human. And I think that this last year and probably this next year is really about having it be okay if people don't like me, they don't understand me, they don't agree with me, and that I can stand in my truth and be okay with that. But it's challenging, especially if I know that I have some areas that may be problematic for me. I mean, how my autism shows up in relationships is in this situation, not so much, but in another one that I'm not going to talk about, I don't think. I felt very affronted, very hurt, very disappointed, very left out, very excluded. And I don't get over things like that very easily. And how do I navigate if I have to be around people where something has happened? And how do I navigate while I'm still, I have a strong sense of justice and what's right and what's fair. And if you're in a group and somebody needs something, you don't exclude somebody because of their need. We kind of give the person that needs the most space, and we adapt. That's what being group-minded is about. Again, I apologize for being vague, but this is the best I can do. And so how do I navigate these really big feelings that I have that may make me feel very hurt and left out and disappointed, and still have to navigate with these people? And what I've been told all my life is, I don't let things go and I take things too seriously and I get hurt too easily. And it's like, you know what? This is how my brain is. And obviously, if I had the ability to go like, boom, I'm over it. Don't you think that's what my choice would be? I think I want to ruminate and feel hurt and sad and really upset and loop for, a really long time. Or I could just snap my fingers and let it go. I think I'll suffer, So having this awareness of how we're wired and the messages that we've gotten, and then how do we work with how we're wired so that we minimize suffering, but honor where we're at? I mean, I think this is very relatable.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like how you put that, because I think I'm still a little stuck on, is there any more clarification you need about my porcupine thing?
I think I'm okay. Yeah. But I think this is what people need to do, is they need to ask for clarification, because we don't always communicate the same way. And if I don't understand, it's my job to go like, I don't get it.
Yeah, no, I'm so thankful. Clarifying questions. Again, I think you know this story for me, but I had a very significant person for many, many years of my life who, when I would ask a clarifying question, would get very, very offended. Mm-hmm. And it was either a threat to their thoughts about their communication skills, or it was me being like difficult, which you're right. Like I don't hit the ground running saying, how can I be the most difficult to my, really significant person in my life?
How can I create lots of conflict and, discourse and discomfort in my day to day? Yeah.
Right. But, and this was kind of an undercurrent of our whole relationship, and has been, what's your ground? Like, where are you coming from? And I come from this place of, it's a miracle we communicate at all and we get some understanding. And so I'm walking through life very happy whenever I can understand anybody. Whereas like if your groundwork is communication is something that's simple and unequivocal and should never be confusing, or then I don't know, if you're around me or you're around people that are wired a little bit differently than you, hello, everybody, right? Because there is no normal. That's the myth. You're going to be upset and frustrated a lot.
Yeah.
So I know for me personally, questioning what set of assumptions am I working under with things is always kind of helpful, and I think whenever I'm stuck in a situation where I'm like assuming that it's all me or that there's something that I'm doing that's inherently flawed or defective. I mean, my favorite saying is, I'm human and therefore nothing human is foreign to me. And it's so less isolating. Like it's a thread that you can find some version of course, the details are different.
Sure.
But this is a part of human. This is a part of human relationships. It's funny, if you step into my house, like you might, and just for overhearing us, you might think we were a household of aliens because we're always talking about like the human thing or it's customary in this human blah, blah, blah to do it this way. And my kids are looking at me like, what? But yeah, it's just really trying to give ourselves some space. I know when I was working on some of that very young, again, like the parts work is so helpful because it's like, what part of me is really in charge right now? Right. And which part of me is going to come and see this a different, because I have parts that vary greatly in how they interpret what I'm experiencing and what other people's motivations or all this stuff. And the truth is, like, we all do this to each other all the time. And if we could just shine a little bit of a light on that, I think it would help alleviate a lot of suffering. And then it's really a lot of acceptance about our, I don't know if you want to call them shortcomings as human beings or just like so typical. I mean, one of the most powerful moments I ever had in therapy was when a therapist, I kept saying like, this person in my life doesn't love me or hates me or doesn't, is disgusted with me. And she's like, end that sentence sooner. This person's having a human experience of being disgusted or not being able to access love for a certain situation or aspect of, yes, you, because you're there, but it's not about you.
Yeah. I wasn't fully attending to you.
That's okay. I do think this is probably the episode we shouldn't use because I'm like, I don't know. I've had a rough morning.
I think there's good stuff in it, though. I think that there is, and I want to proceed, but I just want to be clear. I want to respond to something you said before, and then I thought of something else I wanted to talk about, and I thought I brought some papers in here, but maybe I didn't, and so I was looking, and I just kind of checked out.
That's okay. Thanks for just owning that. That's so beautiful. Yeah. And now if I got all attitudey about it, like let's play this out, right? Okay. How dare you? You did this to me on purpose. Like whatever. I know I'm being ridiculous right now, but like, isn't that what we do? Okay. Yeah. Or you can just be honest and I can be okay with that because hello. Yeah. Me too. I don't always attend.
Or I could say, I hear that when I don't attend, you feel unloved, you feel uncared for. How is that for you? I can hear how it would feel that way for you. How can I communicate to you that I do care? And sometimes I just don't attend. That there's room for that.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. And I think in relationships, we have ways that people can relate with us that we feel loved, and they don't always do those things. And so how do we navigate that? And can we hold the bigger picture of, do they show up for us in other ways? And is this something they always do? Or is this just something that's going on currently? That there are times when I know that I'm far more attentive and times when I'm just not able to. Yeah. It doesn't mean I don't care. I just can't.
It's so funny. I was just thinking how I could have also gone into like shame, like, oh my God, Jen, there you go. You're off on tangents. Nobody can possibly follow you because you're a special kind of defective human. And like make it about, and then go into a place of shut down probably when that shame, it's not up for me right now. I'm just kind of speaking for it because it's human and therefore a part of me. I'm not feeling that right now, but I can imagine that, right? I can imagine doing that. And there's been times in the past where I'm sure I have.
And my sense is if you're an externalizer, then you will get angry with me. You will blame the other person and find fault in what they did to protect yourself. And if you're an internalizer, then you go into something's wrong with you, something's defective about you, you go into shame. And I tend to be much more of an internalizer. I do often, when I loop, I get angry at the other person and I go into self-blame. And when that gets to be too painful, then I flip and get angry at the other person. So you also may see a pattern. Yeah. This is more of my internal dialogue. It is very uncommon for me to externalize my anger and frustration. I tend to go into self-blame and self-doubt.
Right. And so I'm just imagining, I know this is true for me, that, it's funny. It's like, I was just having this fascinating conversation with a client that I really love. who's also a therapist, and we were talking about balance and about how much balance as a static thing is really an illusion. What you're really doing is you're just sliding a little in one direction, a little in the other. And so balance is this very dynamic thing, which is silly. I mean, it's so obvious, but at the same time, like for some of us, internalizing a little bit would be a good idea, right? To be reflective. And then for others of us, being able to externalize a little bit is healthy and provides that sense of balance. And I guess that's why I'm always a little nervous about, I don't know, are you this or are you that? Because really, I think, yes, we absolutely 1,000% have tendencies. You just named it for yourself, and that's real. And as human beings, we have the capacity for both. Maybe if we overdo one, we want to start to grow a little bit, or at least a little more understanding and comfort of the other, and then be able to hold them both.
Right. Well, I have a perfect story about how I did externalize, but you've heard this already.
I'd love to hear it.
And then I have no regrets about it. But I want to drop back to something that you said when you were talking about this relationship that you had. And if you questioned, it created conflict. And often my sense is for probably most of you as listeners, that you have a need for information, for clarification, a sense of meaning, that having that really kind of very clear in your mind, and ambiguity can be very challenging. And I know for myself that I've really run into problems when I question. I think I shared once about with the vet trying to kind of go through, well, if we do this, then, what about this? And, like instead of throwing everything at me at once, trying to figure out how we can check one thing at a time and let's rule that out and then look at this. And I think the vet got very offended because it felt like I was challenging their authority. And for me, it's just my discerning mind and being analytical and trying to sort through things. And I know that often I have a very high need for information, predictability, clarification, things, meaning and justice is very important to me. And that can also feel very threatening to other people because it feels like I'm questioning their authority. And I just want information. And that's what I hear you saying happened in this relationship too, that we bump up against each other, but that's not really what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, gosh, that was so difficult. I mean, it was just, I don't know. Sorry. I just went back into some of those feelings that I was having into that. And then, again, just, I don't want to paint a picture where I make this person wrong. It was just kind of their operating system was very different than mine. And it was, in that particular way, not a very good vibrational match, right? Because again, like these little words that we're using to symbolize a far bigger experience, right? That we can have these moments where we really come close to understanding whatever it is, whether it's an internal experience or just how I see the world, I've gotten to the point, I love questions more than answers anymore. I actually really relish the journey of getting there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I recently had this situation. I was thinking the topic is communication, so I'm making up people's names here. So Mary's a friend of mine, and Mary said that she would call me on a certain day of the week to help me with something, and I didn't hear from her all week, which was fine. And then Mary ran into a friend, Susan, and shared with Susan, and she knows that Susan and I are very, very close, that she just had a hard week and she kind of dropped the ball and blah, 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 blah. And then that was the end of it. And then Susan and I ran into Mary together, and Mary said to Susan, "Oh, did you tell Patricia that I dropped the ball, blah, blah, blah?" And I'm like, "No, I did not get that information." There's a little more to it, but I can't really say.
Now I'm like, oh my God, am I Mary?
No, you were not. You were not Mary. You were not Susan. So I had an opportunity to ask Susan later on about well, why didn't you share that information with me? And Susan said that she felt that she would be betraying a trust of what Mary shared. Like it would be triangulating. And I didn't understand that because Mary shared it with you, and Mary knows that you and I are close and communicate very frequently. And so it was just really interesting. And so I just went back to Mary and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that if you give information to Susan and expect Susan to pass it on to me, there's a good chance I'm not going to get it. If you want me to get information, you need to be very explicit that you want that information to be shared, and I still may not get it. But I think that this is just very common. The reason why I bring it up is because I think that these misunderstandings and how we process information and understand, and is this something I share or I don't share? I think this is really common.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I don't know how this is the stuff of my like nightmares, right? How much of us are walking around with like wrong knowing, thinking that we're so sorry. Sorry, that's probably just a terrible thought to put out there in the universe. But I think because we socially construct each other so much in our heads, my kids and I were watching, I think I might have shared it. I know I was sending you a bunch of silly TikToks or like Instagram reels. My kids and I had this like hilarious weekend. And a lot of it started, actually, that's interesting. Like so much of comedy depends on those types of misunderstandings, right? And there was this one clip we were watching. Maybe you can include it in the show notes. It was so funny. I forget the movie it's from. I actually saw the movie or the show, but there's a text conversation between two people. I think they're brothers maybe. And the one guy is really thinks he's walking into a fight. And the other guy's like, oh, isn't that sweet? And like the response is, this is why you can't infer tone in texting, right? Because the one guy's tone was full of like friendliness and that's adorable. And like, the whatevers weren't whatever. Like the other guy was like furious. And we were in peals of laughter over that deep misunderstanding. And if you think about, all the plot twists or all the a lot of comedy relies on this very human tendency to, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And a lot of us are probably walking around with many, many, many deep misunderstandings. And yet we all do okay. So the reason why, can we create some safety in that? Because I think what happens is with the ambiguity and stuff, it really works on us and we hate it and we want to nail our shirts down. We just want to nail it down and we want to, we crave that kind of certainty. And yet so much of the surprise, energy, aliveness of life is in the telling our stories on ambiguous stimuli.
Yeah.
It reveals to us both who we are and where we're growing and what our edges are. And so it's an invitation to normalize some of it and to find some safety in it, because I know it does freak a lot of us out. And yet it is what's real.
Yeah. And how, for me as a neurodivergent person, how do I support neurodivergent clients who really like that binary, right, wrong, good, bad, this is where the line is, and there's safety and comfort in there? And is it ableist of me to try and get them to be a little bit more in that messy middle?
It's a great question.
I've thought about this. And what I feel like is true for me is the more I can navigate in that messy middle and acknowledge that I do not like the messy middle, I like being in the binary, I like being where things are very clear, but the more I'm able to increase that distress tolerance, it reduces my own suffering. And so is it wrong that I want things to be this or that? No, not at all. Does the world give me things that are this or that? No. So my choices are to either get really upset that it's not this or that, which creates suffering for myself, or for me to go, I prefer things to be this or that. That gives me a lot of peace. And some things are this or that, and a lot of things aren't. So do I want to stick firm to the need for this and that and create suffering for myself? Or do I want to practice some distress tolerance with a lot of compassion, because that reduces my own suffering? Yeah. And it has to come from a place of choice from the person. And I would feel very remiss if a therapist or a coach who has a neurodivergent client really encourages the client, does not name their need for that binary experience. And the message is you're too extreme in your thinking and you need to change, as opposed to this is how you're wired and this is where you're going to want to default to. If that works for you, great, keep it. If that's not working for you, do you want to be able to operate in a few more gears? So when life presents you with things that are not as clear, do you want to work on having some skills so that you don't suffer, not so that you fit into the world better, but that it works better for you?
Yeah, that empowerment is deep. That's beautifully, beautifully stated. Thank you.
Yeah, I struggle with that a lot. I think about that a lot.
You're absolutely right, because what's motivating it? There are certain aspects where I do wish that the world would change. It wasn't so much to fit in. It's just that there is this acceptance and validation, and we all have I am into like so firmly into the growth game, right? Like that it's, and yet that's my bias, right? So if it's figuring out how to build a life that works within those parameters, and when it's challenged, maybe it doesn't feel like an invitation for growth. It feels like, oh, that's a notification that there's a boundary that I need here, and this does not serve me, and I'm out of here. And that's then you're right, that especially for people who work with people, right, that is our client's choice, not ours.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We need to wrap up, but I said I'd tell you a story about when I externalize very much. So one of my children, I'm not going to tell you which one, calls us very regularly and often will lead with, I lost my wallet, I got in a car accident, I lost my phone. And this child usually is speaking to my husband on speakerphone. And I just know that this is what this child does. This child is not a child, but in this story, this child is going to be referred to as a child. And I don't get caught up with it. And oftentimes my husband is reactive, but then thinks that it's a funny joke and it isn't a problem. So we were watching TV Friday night. It was pretty close to getting ready for bedtime. And this child calls my husband. My husband's on speakerphone. My child does not sound right. And says something to the effect of, I'm sick, I'm not doing well. And there was nothing in my awareness that registered what was happening. And then the child said, I'm just joking. And I went immediately into fight or flight.
Yeah.
I feel sad for the dog because I yelled. I was on the couch and my husband was, in another part of the living room. I yelled, F you at least 4 times. Because what happened is I went into fear. I wasn't even aware of that. And I was concerned this child does not live in town, so I can't get to this child. Yeah. And once the fear was alleviated and I knew that it was a joke, I flipped into anger and I said, I'm yelling. And the good news is this doesn't happen very much. So when I lose my shirt, my kids know this was a big transgression because I am just not one to raise my voice, to yell, to have the reaction that I did. And I said, don't you ever do that again. And I was able to explain, I got frightened and then I flipped into anger and they were very contrite. And we were watching TV and I'm done watching TV. And now I'm all jacked up and trying to go to bed. And they did text and said they were very sorry. They were supposed to be here in a few days and said that they'd give us some space. And I was able again to reiterate, you really scared me. And then I got angry. And they have a real fear about what am I going to do when you and dad die? And that's an ongoing fear, which I understand. And I said, what would it be like if I called you and said dad was in an accident, was in the hospital? What if I kept telling you that something was wrong with one of us and we were going to die? It just is not okay. That is very harmful. And now I'm all jacked up and can't go to bed. And again, they were very, very contrite and said that they understood. So I was finally able to go to sleep and wind down. And then at 1:30 in the morning, they call me.
Oh, boy.
Because they tested positive for COVID. And I think that what they needed was for me to co-regulate with them because I was awake for the next 2 hours because I really struggle with staying asleep. If you wake me up, I can't go back to sleep. So not only did this this boy child,
adult,
dysregulate my nervous system before going to bed, then they had to call it, there was nothing that needed to be done at 1:30 in the morning, but they needed me to co-regulate with them. And so, I responded and then was awake for the next 2 hours. And then one of the things that I haven't spoken about today happened the next day. So I was really struggling with this other thing. And then they called me in the afternoon when they had their telehealth appointment and wanted to know, some of my advice. And they could tell that my energy was down. I was like, is everything okay? And it's like, I'm here for you, but I had a hard time calming down last night because of something you did. I was awake for 2 hours in the middle of the night. I haven't had enough sleep today. I have my own things going on and you need my support and I'm here for you. What I didn't say is the world does not revolve solely around you and other people are suffering and need support. And you're very not attuned to that right now. I didn't say that. Whether I should have or not is not on the table. But yeah, this is stuff that we deal with.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I trust you in that moment. The shoulds, there's, I know if we were to go back and clock the number of times or even we can't help it, put it in terms of right or wrong or this or that. It's just pros and cons. to every decision we make. And that was, your call in the moment. I think because we were talking, I had the opposite, similar. It's like start of the school year stuff or something, but I did let my child know exactly how much there are other people inhabiting this space that have their own stuff going on. And again, not right or wrong, just pros and cons, right? From that. And I mean, I know you and I are both pretty big mama bears when it comes to our cubs.
Well, and you and I had talked about this, that I had gotten a message as a child, and it may have only happened once, but I was told, like, who do you think you are, princess, laying around and not helping when other people are doing things? And there may have been more messages, but that is so clear in my mind. And with my wound of too much, I really struggle around how to communicate that to other people when I feel like people are not being attentive, because I don't want to inflict that wound. And this hiccup that I told you about in this relationship was around communicating. I don't think I said you're too much. I think I said I get very overwhelmed very easily.
Yeah, you owned
And
it.
sometimes it's a lot for me to track when you have a lot of things going on. But what was pointed out to me in this kind of, multiple group thing is that in the way that I had shared with you, the listener, in a previous episode about somebody telling me that they could manage being around me for 2 to 3 hours and then it felt too much for them, that I had in turn turned around and said that to somebody else. And so I'm like, oh, did I do that? Did I not do that? So this whole thing around communicating what feels like it's too much and how to own it and not create any more hurt, I don't know how to do that. It's really hard for me.
I hear that. And I love how thoughtful that you're being about it. And I also just know we are limited resources and our context matters. And that includes how much sleep we've had, how our energy is, how much emotional drain's been on us in the last 24, 48 hours, how well we've restored.
Yeah.
So much kind of comes into it.
Yeah. I just keep wanting to go,
It's a lot.
I didn't think I'd screw up the audio levels like I would scream it, because it just feels like there's so much,
Yeah. Yep. I know a lot of us that, we're recording this. It's the first full week of school. There's a lot of transition. There's a lot going on. We are, I know I am I'll speak for myself. I'm like maxed out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just up to my ears in all this relationship stuff that I'm just going to try and do what I need to do that's in front of me today and just let it rest, because in this moment, I can't do anything about it.
That's right.
Yeah. I think that's all I have, Jen. How about you?
All right, my dear. To be continued, I'm sure. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you. I do have to say that this morning, when more of this stuff came up, I just had so much gratitude that I thought I wouldn't be having this insecurity if it happened in my relationship with you. Like, I often have to check with you, and we have to check, like, are we good? We're good. But I did not have this concern, like, if this happened in our relationship, I'd be like, we can work through it.
Oh, good.
In these other relationships, my PDA is like kind of preparing that if this little group and these friendships don't last and it's a rupture that can't be repaired, like, I'm preparing for that to be okay, which is my PDA. So I have a sense of autonomy that if it falls apart, then I've prepared and accepted that. Am I walking away? Am I doing anything to sabotage it? Am I creating this? No. But internally, I'm adjusting and preparing for this to maintain my sense of autonomy, because I don't think I can handle any more dysregulation.
I mean, I love that. You're making me think of this quote about, I know we were just saying goodbye, but one last thing, where the bird in the tree is like, it feels safe, not because it trusts the branch, but because it trusts its own wings. And as you're talking, I'm like imagining a bird like shifting its weight a little bit and fluttering its wing. It's not quite taking off yet, but it knows whatever. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we are people, human beings, like, we're unpredictable. If you catch me on a day where I haven't eaten, I haven't slept, you're going to get you're going to get those porcupine quills, right? Like, I am not going to have the wherewithal. And if I can communicate to you and it's not about you, it's whatever I'm going through. It's like Liv and I, my daughter and I, we have this like little pin that says Cranky Bee on it, and we'll grab it when, just to like kind of just have the alert, because we are this like really complex constellation of factors in any given moment, and it'll change our experience of each other. And I think because we articulate that, like, that's where our safety comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is what we experience in relationships, that sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. When we have conflict, it's an opportunity to see, does everybody have the skill set and the ability to work through conflict and know that rupture and repair is part of a relationship? Or is it just rupture and that repair isn't an option, and that based on people's histories or their skill sets or whatever, that when this happens, that they're just like, this is it, I'm out of here. And that's okay. Because what I really, really want in my life is for me to be able to show up 100% authentically. And I'm going to misstep. Other people are going to misstep. And I want to be able to talk about it and be human and apologize for mistakes that I make. But to know that hopefully that there's nothing that's going to shift that relationship or end it due to being human.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was having a conversation with someone in my life who's important to me about how taking space is not abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that the greatest gift we can do is just take a little bit of that space.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I don't think this is one we're going to check. I think we did okay.
Well, I will leave that one in your hands, that call in your hands. And yeah, it's always good to be with you.
You too, Jen. I appreciate you deeply. Have a great day.
You too, love. Bye.
Bye. Hey again. So what did you think? Did you relate to that? Anything push your buttons? Have any reactions? Reactions and resistance aren't a bad thing. I just think this is all relatable. That's what I'm thinking. Anyways, if you're interested in working with Jen, you can reach out to her at jen@heartfulnessconsulting.com. If you're interested in working with me, you can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a contact me page. I've got a couple of very short videos on my website. If any of this is relatable, if you're late diagnosed, high masking, high internalizing, struggling with relationships, boundaries, parenting, I'm also ADHD, so I'm AuDHD with a PDA profile, the trifecta. I get what it's like to struggle and to navigate through stuff. So if you're wanting some help or some feedback, please feel free to reach out to me or Jen. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how your brain is wired. It's okay to be reactive. It's okay to internalize. It's okay to have your feelings hurt. It's okay to feel misunderstood. It's okay to take space. It's okay to need space. It's okay to choose to be with people. It's okay to choose not to be with people. Whatever is going on for you and however you show up, if you're trying to sort through meaning or having a sense of peace or not rumbling or ruminating about things, it's okay. If it's causing you suffering, then please get some support, because I don't want anybody to be suffering. But sometimes this is just how our brains are wired. And if you're feeling joy and peacefulness and contentment, I think that's great. And it's very likely that you're experiencing some of both, that there's some things that are going well and there's some things that you're struggling with. All of those things are okay. All of your parts are okay. All of who you are is okay. You have value and worth just because of who you are. Thank you for being a listener. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed day.